What is up, everyone? I'm Rusty, your local laboratory maniac, and this is Liaman EDH. New Phyrexians are by far the most powerful interpretation of Phyrexians yet. From humble beginnings, they became the biggest threat to the multiverse, invading planes and spreading their oil. You, as a planeswalker in EDH, need to know how to stop them or, at the very least, become one. In this video, I'll go over 15 unique and powerful Phyrexian based decks so you can bring them to life at your game table. You will learn more about the mechanics, lore, and cards that are associated with Phyrexia as well. Now, let's jump into it and become completed. Stay tuned to the end of this video where I'll be talking about a Christmas giveaway. Karn, who was a construct made by Urza, he came out of the Phyrexian War alive. Remember, Yawgmoth got blown up, he's dead. The Phyrexians were no longer a threat, right? Wrong. Apparently, Karn didn't wash his hands because he actually had Phyrexian oil on him, and it took over the plane of Argentum, a plane that Karn created. Planeswalkers used to be able to snap their fingers and create like infinite space and energy. They were pretty powerful. Argentum turned to Mirrodin, which you probably know it by, or you might know it by its current name, New Phyrexia. The Phyrexians spread their plague on the New World. He too got infected, and Karn became the father of machines. Of course, we got to give the father of machines his own deck. Funny enough, I am currently building this in paper, but I can't take all the credit. The original idea is from a patron of mine who's Neil. He wanted a lore based deck around Karn, who is a pacifist in the lore. So he wanted to win in a colorless deck without combat damage. So that's what this deck is. It's a colorless deck, and it has a lot of moving pieces in it. Karn Silver Golem will be the commander. It's a 5 mana legendary artifact creature golem. Whenever it blocks or becomes blocked, it gets -4/+4 until end of turn. And then you can pay one. Target non creature artifact is an artifact creature with power and toughness equal to its casting cost until end of turn. And it's a 4/4. That obviously -4/+4 when he blocks or becomes blocked is a representation of his pacifism in mechanical form. Now, what are we doing with this deck? Well, we're going to be doing two things. One, we're going to have a Super Friends theme. And I bet you're thinking, hey, we can't have a colorless Super Friends theme. There's not enough. There's about 10 Super Friends or Planeswalkers in this color pairing, and that's enough for what we're going to be doing. And we definitely want to try to win with Karn Liberated, which is a 7 mana planeswalker, has 3 abilities. You +4, target player exiles a card from his or her hand, -3, exile target permanent, and then -14, restart the game, leaving in all exiled non-aura permanent cards exiled with Karn Liberated. Then put those cards onto the battlefield under your control, and he starts at 6 loyalty. So we can essentially restart the game. And I guarantee if you do that, your opponents will scoop instantly. Now, I have about 15 pieces of fog in this deck. A lot of it is repeatable fog, not just instants that are, a one shot kind of thing. So, for example, Scarecrow is a 5 mana artifact creature. You pay 6, tap him until end of turn. All damage done to you by flying creatures is reduced by 0, and it's a 2/2. There's also Alabara's Carpet that does the same thing, except for non flying creatures. So, if you have both out, you can tap them and fog everything. And yeah, it's specific to flying creatures, but name every single like main tribe. You got angels, demons, dragons, birds. They all have flying, so this is pretty effective. Then you got stuff like Orbs of Warding, which is a 5 mana artifact. You have hexproof. If a creature would deal damage to you, prevent one of that damage. There's also Urza's Armor that does the same thing, minus the hexproof part. So all those 1/1 tokens do no damage, and if you have this and the Urza's Armor out, you're fogging 2 damage every time it hits you. So those are pretty good repeatable fog effects. Here's some of the other Super Friends Planeswalkers that we're going to have in this deck. You got Tezzeret, Cruel Captain, that just got released. A little bit before that, the Aether Spark. And I think it would be cool if you give the Aether Spark to the Silver Golem, because originally he wasn't a Planeswalker. Like we said, he got that spark later on. And then, of course, you got all your Ugins and all your Karns you can throw in here as well. Proliferating to kind of offset our opponent attacking us with something like Surge Conductor and other effects will be really good. It says whenever another non-token artifact you control enters, proliferate, and all of our cards are going to be artifacts, so everything we cast will be proliferating. And then I'm sure I don't need to tell you about the Chain Veil. It lets us play Planeswalkers' abilities an additional time each turn. Something I did not include in my draft or Who's Neil's draft is Infect. Now, Karn, like I said, infected a whole world. He just kind of screwed that world over. And he did that by infecting them with stuff. And we're going to be doing that. Now, there's two ways you can do it. There's non-combat ways you can do it, and then there's combat ways. Obviously, you can give someone poison counters. Decimator Web is an example. It's a 4-mana artifact. You pay for it, tap it. Target opponent loses 2 life, gets a poison counter, and then puts the top 6 cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard. So it drains them, gives them a counter, and then mills them. That's pretty good. And we're going to be untapping, tapping, untapping that like crazy. And then you could do the combat route. There's multiple ways to give Infect, like through equipment. You also have Virulent Silencer, which totally looks like a Xenomorph in my opinion. It's a 3-mana artifact creature, robot assassin. Whenever a non-token artifact creature you control deals combat damage to a player, that player gets 2 poison counters. Karn infected the world, but the new Phyrexian society started underground, converting people in secret to their cause and building a complex society. The society formed tunnels and eventually layers to the plane, replicating the original Phyrexia. The oil itself had memories of the past and what the original Phyrexia was, but they were no longer aligned with black mana exclusively. Thanks to the 5 sons of Mirrodin, each color had their own brand of Phyrexia because they grew and evolved under a specific color of sun. Now, each one was led by something called a Praetor. That brings us to our next deck, a Praetor Tribal deck. Now, there are 18 total in Magic, but I only included the Phyrexian ones in this deck, and I'm not including Changelings. So that leaves us with 16. Now, funny enough, I actually have this deck in paper. Its secret commander is the Realmbreaker. It is a 3-mana legendary artifact. You pay 2, tap it, target opponent mills 3 cards. Put a land card from their graveyard onto the battlefield tapped under your control. It gains, if this would leave the battlefield, exile it instead of putting it anywhere else. And then it has a really great ability, pay 10, tap it, sacrifice Realmbreaker, the invasion tree. Search your library for any number of Praetor cards, put them onto the battlefield, and then shuffle. If you get the last ability of Realmbreaker, you essentially will win the game, and that's because they are so strong and have crazy stacks like effects to control the board. Let me just read all of their abilities, assuming you get all 16 out at once. There are 3 of each color plus Gix. Let me just read them real quick for you. Your creatures get +2/+2, and your opponents get -2/-2. You double ETB triggers, and your opponents don't get triggered ETBs at all. Opponents lose 2 life when they do damage to you unless they pay 1. You could discard X cards and steal X cards from your opponent's library. You draw X. At the end step, your opponent discards their whole hand. Their max size is reduced by 7. You copy the first artifact, instant, or sorcery spell while the opponent's first one is countered. You draw when you cast a non-creature spell with 3 CMC or more. Your opponents drain 2 life when you draw, and you gain 2 life. They sack a creature when Shieldred ETBs, which is doubled if you have the Elesh Norn, and they also sack a creature during their upkeep. While you reanimate one of yours on your upkeep, their draws become impulse draws, and you impulse draw at your upkeep. You deal 1 damage and add a red mana whenever you cast an instant or sorcery. Your creatures have haste and theirs enter tapped. You double counters you place on permanents and players. They half the counters. You double your mana and their land stays tapped every other turn. You get to search your library for 2 forests, while 5 of those also transform into sagas that do other things. So you can see with all that, you essentially will win the game. The deck mana ramps like crazy to get to that 10 mana goal. The commander I chose is Eska, God of the Tree. She is a mana dork and makes other legendary creatures mana dorks with vigilance. Now, the backside also cheats out other creatures, and it's the prismatic bridge. But we really don't want that. We want to get all of our Praetors out all at once, and we want to do that by mana ramping. So if we do get out early Praetors, we want Essica out so we can tap them for mana. Mirrodin fought a bloody war, but eventually the Phyrexians and Praetors came out on top. They were just superior to flesh based beings. Every single flesh based being that fell actually joined the ranks of Phyrexia. They eventually just dominated the plane, and with that came a new mechanic to the game, Infect. In 2010, Scars of Mirrodin came out, and it had an ability called Infect that represented the Phyrexians, and still to this day is a broken mechanic. It made Phyrexians, or really any creature, deal damage to creatures in the form of neg 1 counters and to players in the form of poison counters, as long as they had Infect, a flavorful representation of infecting creatures with their oil, and also how deadly it is to planeswalkers. Because remember, in the game, you are a planeswalker. Although Infect was a new mechanic, poison counters were actually not. First revealed in Legends, they had snakes, scorpions, and bugs. Yes, you could make a whole deck focusing on poisoning the opponent without a single card with Infect or Toxic or something that gives Infect or Toxic. And that's kind of what I want to use for this next deck. However, it's more of a secret commander deck. Again, Persuasive Interrogators is a card I really wanted to build around as soon as I saw it. It's a 6 mana creature, Gorgon Detective, pretty cool. When it enters the battlefield, investigate. Whenever you sacrifice a clue, target opponent gets 2 poison counters, and it's a 5/6. Okay, so you sacrifice 1 clue and you can choose any opponent. That's pretty powerful. So as a commander, we're going to want, probably, we have black so we can tutor easily for our secret commander. Green also tutors well. And we're also going to be wanting clues, and we're going to be wanting proliferate effects in case we need it. So I chose Agent Frank Horgan. He's a 7 mana Kogari legendary creature, mutant warrior, has trample. He has indestructible as long as he attack this turn. Whenever he enters the battlefield or attacks, you proliferate twice, and he's an 8/6, so he's pretty powerful. There are no shortage of clue creators investigating in these color pairings. They even came out with a couple from the Avatar set you might have got in a pack. You got Obsessive Pursuit, that creates a clue on ETB and at the beginning of your upkeep. You got Nyla, that when it enters, you exile a card from your graveyard, and then you lose X life and create X tokens, where X is the CMC. So that gets you a lot of clues. There's plenty of ways, and then there's not only ones that investigate, just specifically care about clues. I think there's like 30 ways to make a clue, and like 14 or 15 that care about actually having a clue on the field. There's about 10 cards that say when this deals combat damage to a player, the defending player gets poison counters. And that's going to be pretty good in our deck. So you can definitely throw them in, and they're all in Golgari colors, believe it or not. But we are specifically focusing on that secret commander because we're going to heavily build around clues, draw cards, but getting in a few damage here and there. That way you can proliferate pretty early on with your commander will be great. Who are these Praetors that led each faction, and what are their goals? Elesh Norn is the leader of the White Aligned Phyrexians. They are a religious organization based around the teachings of the Argent Etchings. Unity, zealotry, and morality guide their principles, and they believe that is what will make Phyrexia spread and grow. Their philosophies are similar to the original Phyrexia, believe it or not, but they're seen through the lens of white mana perspective, and it's called the machine orthodoxy. Some of the passages, as you can see on the screen, from the Argent Etchings are in flavor text on cards. Skin is a prison of the blessed and the stronghold of the heretic. Argent Etchings, plate 64, passages 17. Let go of your memories and be reborn. Argent Etchings, plate 106, passage 27. We will sow perfection into the soft flesh of the multiverse. Argent Etchings, plate 38, passage 8. Now, I'd really like to see this written as an actual book that we could read. This first deck will be around Elesh Norn. She is really cool. I actually have this card in this deck in paper. I really love it. It has a lot of old school white cards in it. She is a 4-mana white legendary creature, Phyrexian Praetor, has Vigilance. When a source an opponent controls would do damage to you or a permanent you control, that source's controller has to pay 2 life unless they pay 1 generic. Then you pay 3, sacrifice 3 other creatures, exile Elesh Norn, then return it to the battlefield transformed under its owner's control, and then activate only as a sorcery, and it's a 3/5. Now, the Argent Etchings is the backside of this commander, and it's the teachings, like I said, from Elesh Norn. He has 3 abilities. It's a saga. The first one is Incubate 2 5 times, then transform all Incubator tokens you control. Then the second chapter is creatures you control get +1/+1 and gain double strike until end of turn. Then chapter 3 is destroy all other permanents except for artifacts, lands, and Phyrexians. Exile the Argent Etchings, then return it to the battlefield. Now, since I've talked about my mono white burn Elesh Norn deck before, I'm actually going to have 2 decks for Elesh Norn. I'm going to count it as 1 deck for the total of this deck for this video. So I'm going to have a mono white burn, and I'm also going to have an Elesh Norn Orthodox Church deck. One card that got me really inspired to build this deck, like I said, I own it in paper, is Harsh Justice. It's a 3-mana white instant. You can cast it only during declare attack or step in, only if you've been attacked this step. This turn, whenever an attacking creature deals combat damage to you, it deals that much damage to its controller. So it's not instead, so you still take the damage, but it's essentially burning damage to your opponent. And then you got stuff like Phyrexian Vindicator. It is a 4-mana white Phyrexian horror. It has flying. If damage would be dealt to Phyrexian Vindicator, prevent that damage. When damage is prevented this way, Phyrexian Vindicator deals that much damage to any other target. It's a 5/5. I really like it because you have other stuff like Stuffy Dolls in here that does that. Just redirecting that damage to your opponent, it kind of builds a wall and makes you almost so you can't be attacked, which is how Phyrexians do. We also want stuff to make our things indestructible because what we're going to be doing is playing pariah effects. So pariah says all damage to be dealt to you is dealt to enchanted creature. So if we put timely ward on our Phyrexian Vindicator, so all damage dealt to it can even be 1,000 damage, it still won't die. But if we also have pariah on it, so we have both these on it, if we take 100 damage, our Phyrexian Vindicator will take 100 damage, which would in turn do 100 damage to any target. And that's essentially the strategy of it. Another way I win when the board is kind of stalling out, no one wants to attack, I use Elesh Norn with a lure effect like Nemesis Mask. So if they have 10 creatures, okay, I swing in with Elesh Norn. You have to block with everything. So Elesh Norn gets 10 triggers on the stack. Oh, wait, you don't have 10 mana to pay? Okay, you take 20 damage. It's just a fun little combo. Then you can kind of build her, Elesh Norn, with the sole goal of making a Phyrexian church deck. She led a religious organization, after all, and Argent Etchings is their holy text. So let's make an opponent worship at our church. Priest of Norn is one of many examples that reference religion on a Phyrexian. It has Vigilance and has Infect. It's not the greatest card, but you can definitely throw a lot of Infect in this deck. There's plenty of options in white. Then you got something like Norn's Choir Master, which is a 5-mana white Phyrexian Angel. It has flying first strike. Whenever a commander you control enters the battlefield or attacks, proliferate, and it's a 5/4. And of course, that'll help with your saga if you want to board wipe with your saga. Then you got Duelist of Deep Faith. It's a 2-mana Phyrexian soldier with Toxic 1. As long as it's your turn, she has first strike as a 2/2. There's just a lot of references to religion with a lot of her cards, and I really enjoy that. I think Magic is at their best when they're dealing with Phyrexians. Even with this second generation of Phyrexians, each has their own identity and they do it so well. And your church can tell the stories of other things through other sagas. There are 39 white sagas and 1 colorless saga that you can throw in here. We're doing the proliferating. We are going to have Infect, and our commander is also a saga. So having a saga sub theme would not be bad. History of Benalia makes tokens, boost the tokens. And remember, we want a bunch of creatures to sacrifice to Elesh Norn, so focus in on those token producing sagas. Summon Good King Mog. He makes Moogle tokens, which is pretty cool, and then he can boost your Moogles. And it's actually a enchantment creature saga, so that's pretty cool. The Black Aligned Phyrexians are out for total utter corruption, slaughter, and enslavement. They are led by Sheoldred, the Whispering One. She manipulates warlords known as Steel Thanes or Black Thanes who fight to be her second place. That's how she keeps them from overrunning her. She has them fight amongst themselves. Pretty smart. Now, Sheoldred aligns the most with the original Phyrexians and it exemplifies Black's ambitious nature and obsession with mastering death. She believes in the true scriptures, the original teachings of Phyrexia, untainted by any other mana color. Only through her will Phyrexians spread and be pure. Her main soldier, one inspired by the original Phyrexian negators, are Phyrexian obliterators. In the endless pursuit of perfection, the Phyrexian slicers and stitchers have created their latest lethal masterwork. The flavor text reads, "Behold, blessed perfection, children, the whispering one." The green aligned Phyrexians believe in social Darwinism, the survival of the fittest. Vorinclick's voice of hunger is the predator of this faction, but only because he's the apex predator of the vicious swarm, which is the faction of the green Phyrexians. He believes in creating powerful predators and creating elves to get to the strongest possible Phyrexian out there. They will call the weak through constant fighting. He calls his philosophy the Great Evolution. Only through this can Phyrexia spread and grow stronger. Brute strength, instinct, and sharp fangs is how he prefers to handle things. The fight constantly to compete with one another. This next deck will combine the two philosophies of black and green Phyrexia. Glissa, who was turned by Vorinclex, leads the deck as the commander. The secret commander, however, will be Sheoldred's Phyrexian Obliterator. Glissa Sunslayer is a 3 mana Golgari legendary creature Phyrexian zombie elf. As first strike death touch, whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you choose one. You draw a card and lose life. You destroy target enchantment. You remove up to 3 counters from target permanent, and it's a 3/3. Now, Phyrexian Obliterator has a nasty ability as Trample, but whenever a source deals damage to Phyrexian Obliterator, that source's controller sacrifices that many permanents. And it is a 5/5, so it's no slouch. Now, what is the goal of this deck? It is to make the survival of the fittest by fighting their creatures with Phyrexian Obliterator. They won't attack into him, of course, so we have to kind of force their hand. There are plenty of green instants and sorceries that make creatures fight. And when we fight, their creature will damage our Phyrexian Obliterator, causing them to sacrifice that many permanents. Ancient Animus is an example. It's a 2 mana green instant, but a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control if it's a legendary. Then it fights target creature an opponent controls. Vorinclex would use birthing pods to create his Phyrexian beast that would then grow and fight. We could use that as well because our commander is 3 mana, Phyrexian Obliterator is 4 mana. So if we have birthing pods, sacrifice Glissa, we go get the Phyrexian Obliterator. Or we can surprise our opponent with something like Chord of Calling to tutor him directly from our library onto the field. If they have a 7/7 attacking us, we do this, they have to sacrifice 7 permanents. That's brutal. But that's how Black Phyrexia is. They're brutal, they're cunning, and they'll take everything you got until you are one of them. And remember, since this is a secret commander situation, we want enough reanimation effects and protection effects so we can keep our Phyrexian Obliterator on the field. He is going to be a target for your opponents. Your opponents aren't going to sacrifice stuff to Phyrexia, but they're going to have little choice. Jin-Gitaxis is the Praetor aligned with blue, and as such, he's in the search of perfection through knowledge and experimentation. Naturally, he became arrogant, but that arrogance wasn't unfounded. He thought Karn was imperfect and abhors Vorinclex as a brute. He later came up with the philosophy called the Great Synthesis. He knew about planeswalkers and spread that knowledge, which led to Phyrexia spreading into other worlds, growing Phyrexia. And we will spread the great synthesis with our next deck based on Jin-Gitaxis, which is a 5 mana blue legendary creature, Phyrexian Praetor, as Ward 2. Whenever you cast a non creature spell with CMC 3 or greater, draw the card. Then you can pay for, exile this card, then return it to the battlefield transformed under its owner's control. Activate only as a sorcery and only if you have 7 or more cards in hand. It's a 5/5. I love the flavor of that last ability because it's hey, if you have enough knowledge, which cards and magic mechanically is knowledge, he gets to ascend and he gets transformed into the Great Synthesis. It has 3 abilities. It is a saga. You draw cards equal to the number of cards in your hand. You have no maximum hand size for as long as you control the Great Synthesis. And remember, we're going to have 7 cards in hand when we transform them. So we'll draw a minimum, hopefully, of 7. And then chapter 2 says return all non-Phyrexian creatures to their owner's hand. And then chapter 3 says you may cast any number of spells from your hand without paying their mana cost. Exile the Great Synthesis, then return it to the battlefield. And that's kind of a hint towards omniscience. So you gain so much knowledge that you're omniscient, and then he goes back to Jin-Gitaxis. Now, if I don't know if you noticed this, but the Great Synthesis did not say legendary on it. So if we copy it, we don't have to sacrifice it. There are about 13 ways in blue to copy a saga, like Clever Imposter. Some say copy permanent, some say copy spell, some say copy enchantment. You just go to Scryfall and you can find all of them. Now, once you do copy them, you can do a whole bunch of proliferating and counter removal to keep them around, like with Power Conduit. Then, since you will draw hopefully your whole deck potentially, you can throw in every you win the game when you draw when you have no cards in your library, and win by having so much knowledge, so to speak. Remember, knowledge in Magic the Gathering is drawing. And yeah, of course, I had a deck on here that says win with Laboratory Maniac. My name of my channel is Ladman EDH after all. The red aligned Phyrexians are my favorite by far, and that's because of their Praetor Urabrask. He is similar to the other Praetors in terms of believing in completion and how it elevates living beings, but unlike them, he wants them to choose to become a Phyrexian. Due to his red ties of individualism and empathy, he doesn't want to force them into it. Now, he is not opposed to crushing his enemies or engaging in battle, don't get me wrong. Now, he also has an interpretation of Yawgmoth's teachings. He called them the Great Works, the spread of the building of the Phyrexian world. This deck will have Urabrask Heretic Praetor as the commander, and that is because this card provides card advantage. And now he's a 5 mana red legendary creature, Phyrexian Praetor. As ace, at the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top card of your library. You may play it this turn. At the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, the next time they would draw the card this turn, instead, they exile the top card of the library. They may play it this turn, so it's a 4/4. So it essentially forces them to impulse draw their first draw. Of course, they can draw more later if they have cards that do that, but it kind of slows them down and gets you card advantage by impulsing draw, and you still get your regular draw. This is a red infect deck. Definitely the last thing an opponent will expect. We will also be using fire breathing effects to boost them to one shot an opponent. That way, it's kind of hidden that we're going to do it. Now, Urabrask, he leads a bunch of Phyrexian red creatures like Ogre Menial, which is a 4 mana red creature. Phyrexian Ogre has Infect, and you can pay 1 to boost him +1/+0 until end of turn, and he's a 0/4. So you could boost them a bunch and swing in for damage, hitting them for 10. Now, since we are using infect creatures, if we do something like Chandra's Ignition, we can actually give all their creatures neg 1 counters. It says target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to each other creature in each opponent. So yes, that will also give our opponents infect or poison counters. I always call them infect counters. I know that's not what they are. And then you have something like Waltz of Rage, which is a 5 mana red sorcery. Target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to each other creature. Until end of turn, whenever a creature you control dies, exile top card of your library. You may play it until the end of your next turn. So it also board wipes you. So there's multiple board wipes. A lot of people forget the neg 1 counters when it comes to Infect. They're so focused on poison counters, but don't be like that. Red does non-combat damage best. So let's use what red does best. It uses fire breathing and it does non-combat damage, and we'll use that with Infect. Now, if you don't want to just do board wipes, you also want to do punch effects like Soul's Fire. It says target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to any target. Gravitic Punch is literally a punch card. It says target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to target player, but it also has that jump start ability, so you can do this again and again. Now, if you wanted to go more into that neg 1 counter thing, you can do Soul Scar Mage. That makes it so non-combat damage is dealt in the form of neg 1 counters, which is pretty cool. All Will Be One is another really great one. I'm totally unsure why they All Will Be One is a red card with Elesh Norn on it. You'd think they'd make it a white card. But anyway, it is a 5 mana red enchantment. Whenever you put one or more counters on a permanent or player, All Will Be One deals that much damage to target opponent, creature an opponent controls, or planeswalker an opponent controls. So if you Chandra's Ignition, do like 20 damage and do a whole bunch of neg 1 counters because of your infect creatures, All Will Be One can essentially one-shot one of your opponents. Now, Captive Flame is definitely my favorite fire breathing effect because it's repeatable and can target any creature you want it to target. By paying 1 red mana, it gives them +1/+0 until end of turn. The Praetors eventually conflict with one another. There was a Phyrexian civil war. Elesh Norn teamed up with Jin-Gitaxis, made Sheoldred and Vorinclex submit to them. They all joined forces, but Urabrask refused to join them, believing that their way is a bit too hive mind for his liking. The 4 other aligned Praetors came together to create something showing their unity. They made Atraxa Praetor's voice. Now, who was Atraxa before she became a Phyrexian? Well, she was an unnamed angel fighting with the Mirren resistance. They were engaged in a heavy battle, and eventually the Mirren started getting overrun. But Atraxa single handedly covered the retreat and fell to the Phyrexian army. Now, Elesh Norn was pretty impressed and blessed her with completion with the help of the other 3 Praetors. She, in turn, made another angel named Ixhel, scion of Atraxa. But the angel she made was different. It had emotion, which is very unusual for a Phyrexian, especially one not aligned with red. Now, Ixhel then made Vishgraz out of Geth's body. Geth was a Thane of Sheoldred who fell in battle. So Vishgraz is technically Atraxa's grandchild, technically speaking. Ixhel, scion of Atraxa, is canonically the first creature with Toxic, a new ability that is kind of a dumbed down version of Infect. Infect, when it deals a creature with Infect deals 5 damage to a player, they get 5 poison counters. But Toxic has a number associated with it. For example, Ixhel Scion of Atraxa has Toxic too. So when she deals combat damage to a player, she does 2 poison counter in addition to the regular 2 damage that she'll deal because she has 2 power. And another new ability is called Corrupted. Now, this is an ability that gives you benefit if your opponent has 3 poison counters on them. So, what we're going to do is we're going to play an Ixhel deck that cares about getting as many counters on your opponents, up to 3, as soon as possible. And it's not going to be through combat. Now, Ixhel, Scion of Atraxa, is a 4 mana absent legendary creature, Phyrexian Angel, has flying, vigilance, and toxic 2. Then its corrupted ability says at the beginning of your end step, each opponent who has 3 or more poison counters exiles the top card of their library face down. You may look at and play those cards as long as they remain exiled, and you may spend mana as though it were any color to cast them, and she's a 2/5. There are 27 total ways in this color set that give poison counters without doing combat damage. A lot of them are instants and sorceries. So this is kind of like a Spellslinger infect deck, you could say. Vraska's Fall is an example. It's a 3 mana black instant. Each opponent sacrifices a creature or planeswalker and gets a poison counter. Caress of a Phyrexia is one of the OG new Phyrexia cards. It is a 5 mana black sorcery. Target player draws 3 cards, loses 3 life, and gets 3 poison counters. So, yeah, they get to draw cards, but they're automatically corrupted. And I love the flavor text that says, I am weak, make me ideal. And then you got Infectious Bite. It's a 2 mana green instant. Target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to target creature you don't control, and then each opponent gets a poison counter. So it's a punch effect that gives a poison counter. And just like Ixhel's mother, Atraxa, we want to hold off our opponents while we slowly sling spells to give them poison counters. I keep wanting to say infect counters. I know it's poison counters. You can do something like Peacekeeper or Blazing Archeon. Now, both of these say creatures can attack. And then, well, Blazing Archeon says creatures can't attack you. So, stall out your opponent as much as possible, sling some spells, steal their spells with your commander, and your opponents they won't be able to stop the Phyrexian calls. Now, whispers from Jin-Gitaxis cause rumors to spread through the Phyrexian ranks. Worlds exist, worlds without Phyrexia. They need to bring the greatness of Phyrexia to them. So, starting a journey, Vorinclex went to Kaldheim, stole some of the sap from the World Tree after Jin-Gitaxis goes to Kamigawa and experiments with the spirits of the Kamigawa plane, creating something called a reality chip. Both of these will be key in what is to come. The sap was placed in a vat of glistening oil, and it produced something called the Realm Breaker, allowing the Phyrexians to travel the multiverse yet again. It would anchor its limbs into another world. Pods lined its limbs as well, with various functions. Some hold soldiers that would start engaging in battle, others sprayed glistening oil into the air, and then others had pods where soldiers would bring captives to turn them into Phyrexians. The reality chip was just as important. The user would wield it and bend the reality of a single ability that they possess, augmenting what they could do. For example, the Emperor, the Wandering Emperor, she had a spark that constantly was having her planeswalk to other places randomly. However, with the reality chip, she could control that. She can augment her spark, which she naturally has a spark, to do what she wanted. And in Jin-Gitaxis' case, he gains control of the reality chip and he uses it to complete a planeswalker. He can complete things, but planeswalkers were unable to be completed because Phyrexians, when a planeswalker gets completed by a Phyrexian, they lose their spark. Now, this feat was impossible before, but with Realmbreaker now and Planeswalker, Phyrexia can once again invade the multiverse. The first time they're able to do this since old Phyrexia. Urabrask joins the multiverse vacation bandwagon and goes to New Capenna, a plane destroyed by Phyrexians save one city. Now, New Capenna, the city, is ran by 5 demonic crime families. Urabrask is going there to recruit planeswalkers to his cause to fight the other 4 Phyrexian factions. Also, something called Halo is there. Now, angels, which were turned to stone, contain Halo, and it makes someone resistant to Phyrexian oil, a possible weapon that could be used against the Phyrexian invasion. Now, the first plane to be targeted by the Phyrexians is, of course, Dominaria. Poor Dominaria, always the target of Phyrexians, even after Yawgmoth is long gone. Now, Sheoldred led the invasion, but it was really an underground invasion at first, where cults formed, people were being turned in secret, they were gaining power slowly and weakening the forces of Dominaria. It led to a huge battle while Sheoldred became massive. Now, Sheoldred, she's a sneaky snake. If you look at the art there, her body is only that top portion. That big centipede giant butt that she has is all augmentation. So she's usually not that powerful, but she was slowly gaining power as the cult would bring her weapons to form onto her body. But she ends up losing. Now, I wanted to make a Dominaria based deck with Phyrexia. And one thing I thought about is I made this in another deck video. Like, I didn't make this deck, but I thought of it while filming is Togo Goblin Weaponsmith, which is, of course, a resident of Dominaria. He's a 3-mana red legendary creature goblin artificer. When a land enters the battlefield under your control, create a colorless equipment artifact token named Rock with equipped creature has pay 1, tap it, sacrifice Rock. This creature deals 2 damage to any target, then equipped 1, and then has a partner, and it's a 2/2. So the whole goal of this deck is to give Togo Goblin Weaponsmith or any other creature infect, or just have infect creatures, because the rock says this creature deals 2 damage to any target, not the rock does 2 damage to any target. So if your infect creatures do damage, they do it in the form of poison counters. So Togo is going to be a pretty powerful commander for this. Pairing Togo with Sidar Kondo would be great, not only because of his ability, but can you picture Togo, a Phyrexian Togo, throwing rocks while riding a horse? Now, this is pretty cool. Now, Sidar Kondo is a 4-mana Selesnya legendary creature, human knight, has flanking. And then creatures your opponents control without flying or reach can't block creatures with power 2 or less into 2/5. So if we're going to have a lot of infect, they're probably going to be weaker. Naturally, infect creatures are weaker in terms of their power. Sidar will make it so they can't be blocked. That's also good. So when we can't throw rocks or we run out of rocks, we can just swing in. Cheating that equip cost with stuff like Pure Steel Paladin will help a lot. We will be ramping like crazy, but still a 0 equipped would be nice. And if I were you, I'd run maybe 15 infect creatures. It doesn't have to be a lot for this deck because you only need 1 or 2 really. And since we're going to have a pseudo equipment theme just because of our rocks alone, we can do grafted exoskeleton and whispering cloak effects that give infect or make things unblockable or untargetable. So as we're throwing our rocks, our opponents can't do anything but sit there and get pelted. Each faction led a specific class of army. White faction had the Alabaster Host, which was a bulk of the invading force for the multiverse. Elesh Norn needed the biggest army. Her ego wouldn't allow anything else. The Alabaster Host was the most unrelenting and fanatical host of the Machine Legion. As they invaded, they sang hymns to the machine orthodoxy. Keep in mind, Phyrexian voices sound like metal rubbing together, grinding and screeching. It is not a beautiful song. The Alabaster Host was led directly by Elesh Norn, who masterminded the deployment of the Phyrexian Machine Legion from her throne room on New Phyrexia. Angels, soldiers, and mites spread the glory of Phyrexia, bringing unity to the other worlds. Phyrexian mites were a new type of token for this set. They are artifact creatures and can't block. They carry disease in the lore, like a Phyrexian flea, so they had the toxic ability as we talked about earlier. Captain Rhea Ivar was an Auriok knight from the settlement of Bladehold in the Razor Fields on Mirrodin, now New Phyrexia. She was completed in the events of Phyrexia All Will Be One, so she survived the Phyrexians pretty long. She had one notable battle where she was ambushed by Phyrexians, but she fled. 7 days later, she led a campaign and saved hundreds, but she was defeated inevitably. Now, being a hero in fighting against the Phyrexians, it's almost like fighting against the tide of the ocean. It's almost impossible. Eventually, you're going to slip up and you're going to be infected by them. Funny enough, this is another Phyrexian based deck I own in paper. I'm clearly a Phyrexian agent. Someone stop me. Now, Rhea Ivor, Bane of Bladehold, is the commander for it. It is a 4-mana Orzhov legendary creature, Phyrexian Knight. As battle cry, and at the beginning of combat on your turn, the next time target creature would deal damage to one or more players this combat, prevent that damage. If damage was prevented this way, create that many 1/1 colorless Phyrexian by artifact creature tokens with Toxic 1, and this creature can't block, and it's a 3/4. And of course, you can throw in all the Mite stuff that you want. This deck really just cares about her ability to create mites because I'm going to use a lot of stuff that care about the number of creatures you control. But Skrelv's Hive is another enchantment that creates a 1/1 colorless Phyrexian Mite creature artifact token with Toxic 1. during your upkeep, which is pretty nice. Some all-star cards in this deck are Kimba's banner-like effects. Equipments or auras that say equipped creature gets +1/+1 for each other creature you control. So let's say we have like 7 creatures, one of them being our commander. We can add this to our commander, choose our commander for her own ability, do 10 damage to an opponent, but prevent that damage and get 10 tokens. Now, preventing the damage kind of seems redundant. Isn't the whole point to win the game? Well, one thing we're going to be doing is playing all the blood artist effects that we can. So we build our army, keep building our army, and your opponents will eventually have to board wipe or they'll be overrun. And when they do board wipe, it'll almost be like they lose anyway because Phyrexia is inevitable. So if you have 20 mites and they board wipe and you have a few blood arse effects out, they die anyway. Or you can just swing in with 20 mites, giving them at least 10 poison counters. So either way, that's essentially the strategy of this deck. Overrun effects are pretty good in this deck. One I highlight for this, and I've never seen anyone play this card, which is a shame. It's so powerful. It's called Starlight Spectacular. Technically comes from an Infinity set. However, it is legal in Commander. It's a 4 mana white enchantment. It has the Parade ability. At the beginning of combat on your turn, choose creatures you control one at a time until each creature you control has been chosen. Each of those creatures get +1/+1 until end of turn for each creature chosen before it. Now, this is essentially having your creatures go into a line and their number orders how many +1/+1 boosts they get. And then, of course, you're making tokens. Modrak Glory Dominus is a Phyrexian horror. And now the Dominus, I'll talk about them here in a second, but they're pretty cool. It's doubles creature token production. Actually, no, it's any tokens, not just creatures. And it can be indestructible. It can become indestructible by sacrificing 2 artifacts and/or creatures, which we will have plenty of. The Dominus of new Phyrexia are powerful, godlike Phyrexian entities born from the plane's landscape, acting as a monumental figure embodying each Praetor's philosophy. There's 5 in total, with each granting powerful doubling effects for their respective colors' goals, and they're also able to be turned into indestructible while having to sacrifice something to do so, which is kind of fitting. Phyrexians always had to sacrifice back in the day to become powerful, and these do too. The Alabaster Host would turn people, carrying them over to Realmbreaker's limbs, which actually held conversion vats, and then have them incubate. Each faction would transform others in the image and likeness of their Praetor. That's kind of how it goes. The white aligned Phyrexians are known to have invaded at least 9 planes. Some big ones, too. You got Zendikar, Theros, Kamigawa, Kaladesh, Eldraine, Arcavios, and the list goes on to represent converting people from normal to Phyrexia. March of the Machines came out with an ability called Incubate. Incubate creates an incubator token, and incubate is associated with certain numbers. For example, if it's incubate 2, you would make an incubator token with 2 +1/+1 counters on it. And it's not a creature, but you can pay 2 to transform it, and it transforms into a Phyrexian token that's a 0/0. But since it has those +1/+1 counters on it, it won't automatically die. Now, like I said, Theros was invaded and Bramaz was converted. He's a big cat dude. He's pretty cool. I remember when he was in standard in Theros, I played a deck with him. So sad to see him get turned. Now, he becomes a 4 mana Orzhov legendary creature Phyrexian cat. Whenever you cast a Phyrexian creature or an artifact creature spell, incubates X, where X is that spell's CMC. And then at the beginning of each instep, if a Phyrexian died under your control, proliferate, and it's a 3/5. So this is doing a few things. It's making those incubator tokens that we can transform later, and they get bigger the bigger Phyrexians we cast. And at the instep, if we do some kind of aristocrat shenanigans, like sacrifice something, we can proliferate, which makes our incubator tokens larger. So when we transform them, it'll be great. Completed Hutmaster is definitely a card you want to throw in here. It's a 3 mana Black Phyrexian Elf Warrior. You pay 1, tap it, sacrifice another creature or artifact, incubate 3. So it's doing the sacrifice thing, which will trigger Brimaz. It's a 2/3. I actually call this deck the Phyrexian Orphanage because I just see Brimaz like kind of watching over these like a father figure and watching them grow, and then he's going to send them off to college. Of course, proliferating is going to be huge. Metastatic Evangel is a Phyrexian human cleric. Whenever another non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, you proliferate. It's also a Phyrexian. Sunfall is a 5 mana white sorcery. Exile all creatures. Incubate X, where X is the number of creatures exiled this way. And this is a really cool card because it shows Heliod who got converted, I should say. He does transform in the game from a normal Heliod to a Phyrexian Heliod. So he actually gets converted because Elesh Norn is all about religion. So Theros was totally her breeding ground. She converted the people that worship Heliod. And they started to believe that Heliod was also Phyrexian, which belief on Theros turns people. So it turned him into a Phyrexian, and that's what Sunfall represents. Progenitor XR is probably one of the best Incubate Tribal cards you can have. It's an XX white Phyrexian cat cleric. Whenever it enters the battlefield, incubate 3 X times. So let's say you pay 3 mana into this total. So X is 1. You incubate 3 1 times. If you pay 5, it's 2 times, and etc. And then you can tap her, transform target incubator token you control, and it's a 1/2. That's pretty powerful. So you don't have to pay that 2 mana to transform them. And then since you're technically your artifacts, even though they're not creatures, they still have those counters. So if they were to leave somehow someone does a Vandal Blast, for example, you want something like Resourceful Defense, which is a 3 mana white enchantment. Whenever a permanent you control leaves the battlefield, if it had counters on it, put those on another target permanent. And then you can pay 5 to move counters around from one permanent to another. So if you incubate 3 times and you have 3 incubator tokens, 2 of them die, your other one will have 9 counters on it instead of the 3. Now, one mechanic that I think should be mentioned is the idea of Phyrexian mana. Now, Wizards of the Coast is always experimenting with alternative mana costs. Mana is a resource limiter in Magic the Gathering, which is what makes it great. So, whenever you mess with it, things can get kind of crazy and not always in the best way. Now, instead of a mana symbol, it'd have one of these symbols on the screen. You can pay 1 mana of that color, or you can pay 2 life. The new Phyrexian wave of this was not really received well, since some of the cards only cost 1 mana to begin with, so they're essentially free, like Noxious Revival or Gutshot. But in the all will be one block, it was toned down a bit, placed on abilities and not creature costs typically. Now, most of those transformed in from a regular creature into a Phyrexian, which I thought was a cool way to go about it. Volcarinos was a Hydra that Elspeth Torrell actually beat on her first visit to Theros and the Theros block. But, it eventually got reborn, and then Elesh Norn converted it to Volcarinos Engine of Ruin. Now, it's a 3 mana legendary creature Hydra. It has reach, and then you can pay 6 in a Phyrexian white. You transform Volcarinos Reborn, activate only as a sorcery, and it's a 4/5. And then the flip side says it has reach and lifelink. And whenever it or another non token Hydra you control dies, create a 3/3 green and white Phyrexian Hydra creature token with reach and a 3/3 green and white Phyrexian Hydra token with lifelink. And it's a 6/6. That's obviously a reference to Wormcoil Engine. When Wormcoil Engine dies, you get 2 3/3 tokens. One has Death Touch and one has lifelink. So one way to go about this is play your commander, transform them, and then start playing all the Hydras you can where X is 0. Because most Hydras ETB with X +1/+1 counters on it. So if you pay 0 into X, they automatically die. So for example, you have your commander out, it's transformed. You play Mistcutter Hydra for 1 mana, it comes in as a 0/0 and then automatically dies to state-based actions. And then your commander will make you a 2 3/3s. one with lifelink, one with reach. So for 1 mana, you get 2/3/3 tokens. That's pretty good. Feral Hydra, another example. There's a dozen or probably 2 dozen Hydras that do this. And then, since most of your creatures will be 1 CMC, you can do stuff like Patch Up that return up to 3 target creatures with total mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. So if you have your Transform Commander out and 3 in the graveyard, 3 Hydras in the graveyard, play Patch Up, bring all 3 to play. They all automatically die, getting you 6/3/3 tokens. You can really swarm the board like this. Proclamation of Rebirth is a similar effect. You return 3 target creature cards with CMC 1 or less from your graveyard to play. The Chrome host was under Jin-Gitaxis' command. Since he is aligned with Elesh Norn in the Phyrexian Civil War early on, she actually let him keep command of his army. It was a knowledge collecting army of the military, an intelligence agent kind of situation, if you want to think about it that way. They were gathering information to spread the Phyrexian plan. They went to Amonkhet, Arcavios, Ikoria, Kaladesh, Kaldheim, Kamigawa, Tarkir, and Theros. They went everywhere just collecting information. And there's a few cards that actually show the Chrome host, like Chrome host Seed Shark and Chrome host Hulk. Now, Sheoldred controlled the Etched Host, and Sheoldred wasn't doing so great in the war. She tried to conquer Dominaria. That was like her focus, and she totally failed to do so, which displeased Elesh Norn, who kind of like beheaded her, sent her to the graveyard. Now, the Etched Host, her army, was split between the Steel Thanes, who were pretty vicious. Their cruelty was on full display during this war. They were attempting to gain Elesh Norn's favor and trying to outdo one another in how vicious and kind of effective they could be. The Furnace host had no leader because Urabrask was eventually working against the other Praetors. He was helping the opposing Planeswalkers, though, but Elesh Norn let the Furnace host kind of do their own thing after she would release them onto a plane. Red does cause havoc and destruction pretty well, after all. Lastly, Vorinclex led the Copper host. Instead of converting everyone willy nilly, they actually would choose individuals who could put up a good fight. They would only be the strongest to be added to their ranks. So they didn't convert as many people as the other hosts. However, what they did convert were boss creatures, so they had the strongest of the strong. Splicers are artificers from New Phyrexia who use glistening oil to transform living beings into mechanical organic creatures, often replacing body parts with metal and making them golems. They are integral to the Phyrexian project of completion. They're also on the Realmbreaker arms. Completing is a perverse imitation of natural life to them when flesh is replaced with machinery. Remember, Phyrexia's goal is to get rid of the flesh and replace it with machinery because machinery doesn't really die. For this next deck, I wanted to make a Splicer based deck, but I wanted to do it with a twist. So here are the partner commanders. Ichtekic Savage Splicer is a 5 mana green legendary creature human artificer. When it enters the battlefield, create a 3/3 colorless golem creature artifact token. Whenever an artifact is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature and a +1/+1 counter on each golem you have. And then it's a partner and it's a 1/1. And Ishai Ojitai Dragon Speaker is a 4 mana Azorius legendary creature, bird monk, has flying. When an opponent casts a spell, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature as partner, and it's a 1/1. So a lot of +1/+1 counter shenanigans, which I'll play around with a little bit. But what we're really focusing on is that it's a Splicer tribal deck. Now, the twist is we're going to be using Splicer's skill as a secret commander kind of situation. It's a 3 mana white sorcery. It says create a 3/3 colorless golem artifact creature token, splice onto an instant or sorcery for 4. Now, most of our deck is going to be instant and sorcery. We are going to have all the splicers and then some very big hitters like Blightsteel Colossus, for example. And what we're going to do is take our golems, turn them into something else using polymorph effects. If you don't know, polymorph effects essentially say, sacrifice or destroy a creature that you control and then reveal the top card until you reveal a creature, put it into play. So A less than ideal situation would be we have a golem, we use polymorph. It polymorphs into another splicer, which gets us another golem. So we really don't lose anything. We're still netting positive here. But if we do polymorph the golem, one of the best hits we can get is Blightsteel Colossus, which is one of Phyrexia's greatest weapons. So either way you go about it, you're either getting more slicers and more golems, or you're getting a big hitter that can end the game. Darksteel Splicer is one of the best splicers we can have. Now, whenever it or another non-token Phyrexian enters the battlefield under your control, create X 3/3 colorless Phyrexian Golem artifact creature tokens, where X is the number of opponents you have. So anytime a Phyrexian ETBs, you get hopefully at least three, unless some opponents have died, three golem counter or golem tokens. That's pretty good. And then it says golems you control have indestructible, even better. Now, I haven't mentioned it too much about it because I can't mention every single fact of Phyrexia. I wish I could, though, on this video. But dark steel is an indestructible metal. That's why she gives all golems you control indestructible, because she's making golems out of the dark steel. She's splicing human flesh, living flesh with dark steel, which is pretty cool. And then Blightsteel Colossus is a converted version of Darksteel Colossus, which is why he also has indestructible, but he also has trample and infect. He's an 11/11. You know him, you've seen him. Every single person has lost to Blightsteel Colossus at least once if you've been playing EDH for a while. So, like I said, you want to polymorph into more splicers, or you want to polymorph into more big hitters like Blightsteel Colossus. Now, we obviously also want to blink. Splicers have ETB abilities where they make golems, so ephemerate effects you can totally do. But one thing I do want to mention, splicing with Splicer skill, for example, creates an interesting rules dynamic. So let's say I cast ephemerate and then I splice Splicer skill onto it. But then I have swarm intelligence or something that copies that instant or sorcery. The Splicer's skill will be an ability on the ephemerate. I'm not casting Splicer's skill. It's just it gets added on to ephemerate. So if you copy that ephemerate, it'll copy the Splicer skill as well. That's an interesting way you can go about it. You can put as many copy abilities as you can in here so you get more bang for your buck. Planeswalkers weren't about to let Phyrexians go unchecked, but they wouldn't do something dumb enough like go to the home base of Phyrexia where the air can literally turn you, right? They'd regroup and lead a focused and targeted resistance, spreading the word, warning planes, right? They wouldn't do something stupid, right? Now, if you can't pick up on social cues, you know I'm being sarcastic. They, of course, did the stupid thing. They went headfirst into Phyrexia. Half of them get converted like a bunch of idiots. They did the same thing with Eldrazi. They did the same thing with Bolus. Their egos always get in the way. Ugin has warned them, Johnny has warned them. They all warn them, but they never listen. They're egotistical jerks. They're like the worst, okay? Ajani, Tamio, Vraska, Luca, Nissa, and Jace all get converted. Some get injured, and that kind of causes the conversion. Now, in their defense, they had like Halo with them that was supposed to protect them from the Phyrexian air and stuff like that, but it only protected them so far. Like, for example, Luca, a giant idiot. I know some people love Luca. Okay, you can love Luca. But he bonded with a Phyrexian beast. What do you think's going to happen? He got converted by bonding with a Phyrexian. It's like, oh, that's a cute dog. Oh, it has rabies. I'm going to be friends with it. Surely nothing bad would happen. Anyway, okay. Rain over. Now, Jay's actually got turned by Vraska because they're kind of romantically involved. So he kind of got a Phyrexian STD, I guess you could say. It was all crazy how it all went down. In my opinion, the writing was kind of bad. They didn't know what to do. They had this whole epic thing happening and they needed the heroes to do something, but they kind of botched it, in my opinion. Here's a picture of all the completed planeswalkers. I really liked how they did it because they actually, I think, had like 14 planeswalkers in the set. And what they did was made a Phyrexian version of every single one, just to kind of fool people to think, hey, this person's Phyrexian, who's going to be Phyrexian? I thought that was well done in this set. Now, whoever became Phyrexian is on the screen here. Tamio, she became a Phyrexian, and she was actually the first one to become Phyrexian. Johnny became a Phyrexian. He was the second one to become Phyrexian. And then Nahiri, Luca, Nissa, Vraska, and Jace became Phyrexian in total. Now, this brought us a yet another Phyrexian-based keyword, completed, placed on planeswalkers that in the lore were turned into Phyrexians. Completed is the first planeswalker-only keyword ability, actually, and it's associated with Phyrexian mana. Now, if part of the mana cost is paid with life, that Phyrexian mana symbol, if you pay life with it, the Phyrexian Planeswalker enters with fewer loyalty counters. That's kind of the perk of completed. You can either pay the full cost, get the full benefits, or you can do the completed cost and get a little less, but you get it out early pretty much. Many moons ago, probably at least 5 to 10 years ago, I started making a Super Friends deck of any color. I like Planeswalkers because they have story behind them and I connect with the story. Now, Jace was my theme for my original one, and that was before the Phyrexian stuff happened. And then eventually the Phyrexian stuff did happen. He got converted. Now, then I was like, wait, I want to turn my Jace one into a Phyrexian Jace one. So I did. But then Jace essentially thought his way out of the being a Phyrexian and became normal again. But I didn't want to go back to a normal Jace. But then a couple weeks ago, I was like, you know what? I kind of do want a normal Jace one. But I also want a Phyrexian one, and I'm not going to build two decks for this. So what I ended up doing was finding my original list, and there's about a 20-something card difference between that and my Phyrexian Jace. And some of them are basic lands because I switched out the basic lands because I had Jace basic lands for the original one, and then I wanted Phyrexian basic lands for, so I ended up keeping a sideboard. I got all the cards that were in my original one, and now I have a sideboard. So if I want to do just the Jace ones that weren't Phyrexian, I can switch all them out and put those in, and vice versa. Now, you could do this for any color or any card, really. Let's say you have name any character that's been converted. You can have a deck and then have a sideboard and swap them out depending. Like maybe one game you play the regular one, swap some out, play the next one. I think that'd be really cool, and that could be a game way to show that you're turning into a Phyrexian. Tecuthal Inquiry Dominus is the commander for the Phyrexian version. It's a 4 mana blue legendary creature, Phyrexian Horror. It has flying. If you would proliferate twice instead. Then you can pay 3, remove 3 counters from among artifacts, creatures, or planeswalkers you control. Put an indestructible counter on Tecuthar, and it's a 3/5. So it's pretty powerful. So the theme of this deck has a lot of proliferating. Our goal is to proliferate our Jaces, which we have Jaces, Tezzerets, and Tamios in here because those are the Phyrexian aligned planeswalkers. Technically, Tezzeret was never converted per se, but he was on their side. So have them out, proliferate like crap, ultimate the planeswalkers, win the game. Now, in the original Jace deck I had, Jace Vryn's Prodigy is actually the commander, so I do switch out commanders. And also, the theme of that deck was more mill based. It had every single card, which I think there's 6 now, that say target player mills half their library. And then it has stuff like Fraying Sanity and that one advisor. It starts with a B. I can't remember it. That when someone mills something, they mill double that instead. So essentially, they mill their whole deck. And I controlled the board by bouncing things back to people's hands. I had like Evacuation, Ether Spouts, you name it, I had it. So if they had an army, I got rid of it. I played my planeswalkers, let them control the board as well. They're mainly there to control the board until I can get something like cut your losses, traumatize kind of effects to bail my opponent out. Now, like I said, we're going to be proliferating. So you might want Infect in here. Viral Drake proliferates and also has Infect. It's a really good creature to throw in here. Moon Gauntlet is an example of how Tamio was completed. It also gives planeswalkers you control a zero ability that proliferates. So it proliferates every planeswalker. It's pretty good. And you can -12 take an extra turn after this one. I did throw in quite the amount of artifact tutoring just to get this out. And then whenever you cast a non-creature spell, choose a counter on target permanent, put an additional counter of that kind on that permanent. And of course, we have mostly non-creature spells, so it's just an amazing card for this deck. And just to highlight the difference, on the left is the Phyrexian lands. I got the foil etched ones, they're pretty cool. But then on the right, you see the Jace Island. Jace is that little tiny little speck on that second island part right there, if you can see it. They clearly did not want him to have a close up. Now, the planeswalkers didn't go to that plane to Phyrexia, New Phyrexia, with no plan. Their whole goal was to take the Urza's disc. Remember that? They actually made a replica. Who was it? Saheeli made a replica of the Silex. Their whole goal was to blow up the plane, essentially. Now, Jace, even though he was converted, he stuck to the plan. He didn't. He was like, "I'm going to do it anyway." But other planeswalkers, because they thought that it might be too mean and it might damage other planes and kill all the Mirrodin rebels, they decided not to do it. But Jace was like, screw that. I'm going to do it because this is what's best for the multiverse. And in my opinion, he was right. However, Elspeth pops in last minute, grabs the Silex, and takes it to the Blind Eternities before it detonates. And it detonates with her holding it in the Blind Eternities. Now, funny enough, that filigree silex that was made on Kaladesh by Saheeli had an ability that was shown in the March of the Machines called oil counters. As you know, glistening oil is something that is used to spread the virus. I will say the oil counter shenanigans is pretty weak, but if you build it right, it could be fun and pretty powerful. I'm not sure why the Silex required oil. I know that the original Silex you had to fill with the memories of the land and it would destroy things. So I guess in theory, if you fill this Silex with oil, it would destroy the Phyrexians, maybe? That was like it wasn't really clear to me. For our commander, we're going to be building a Gruul based deck. Miglaw's Maze Crusher is the commander. It's a 3-mana Gruul legendary creature Phyrexian beast. When it enters the battlefield, it enters with 5 oil counters on it. It then has 3 abilities. You pay 1, remove a counter from him. It gains vigilance and menace until end of turn. You pay 2, remove 2 oil counters. It gets +2/+2 until end of turn. Then you pay 3, remove 3 oil counters, destroy target artifact or enchantment. It's a 4/4. Now, artifact and enchantment destruction on your commander is very powerful. It's very underrated. It doesn't look that good at first, but trust me, in play it is. And then the Filigree Silex is the kind of secret commander of this deck, so to speak. It's a 2-mana legendary artifact. You can tap it, put an oil counter on it, tap it, sacrifice it, destroy each non-land permanent with mana value equal to the number of oil counters on the Filigree Silex. You can tap it, remove 10 oil counters from among permanents you control, and sacrifice the Silex. It deals 10 damage to any target. Now, getting that is going to be pretty powerful. And of course, we're going to have a lot of ways to proliferate, get as many oil counters as we can. We're going to really strike oil with this. And then we're going to bring back the Filigree Silex and do it again and do it again. Armored Scrap Gorger is a creature that I put in almost every green deck because it's a mana dork, which you normally want in green, but also when it's tapped, you graveyard hate. You exile target card from a graveyard, but you also put an oil counter on them, so it goes with our deck pretty well. And then Churning Reservoir, it puts an oil counter on a non-token artifact or creature you control at your upkeep. You can pay 2, make a 1/1 red Phyrexian Goblin creature token, but only if you removed an oil counter from something. So it makes tokens, which is nice, but really every upkeep you're putting more and more oil on it. You can put more on your commander, remove more artifacts or enchantments, or boost them, or what have you. Counter doubling is obviously going to be great. Innkeeper's Talent's last ability essentially doubles counters. So does Vorinclick's Monstrous Raider, which was kind of Vorinclick's when he went to Kaldheim, which is pretty cool. It says if you put 1 or more counters on a permanent or player, put twice that many of those kind of counters on that permanent or player instead, which is pretty good. And he's a 6/6. He's no slouch. Eventually, Elspeth became an angel connected with the spirit of Sarah, which was a planeswalker that's been long dead, and rejoins the fight. She kills Elesh Norn by beheading her. Apparently, without Elesh Norn alive, all the Phyrexians on other planes become inert. Kind of lame, to be honest. It's kind of how Magic goes. They set up pretty well. They're like amazing at setting up a story, and then they cannot hit that landing. They can't finish it because one, they're afraid of people like hating it or it having too much ramifications in future stories. It's kind of annoying, but yeah, the battle, the art, perfect. It's amazing. The Elspeth fighting Elesh Norn, that's pretty cool. After being beheaded by Elspeth, Elesh Norn's head and body were completely atomized by Karn, making her death likely very permanent. Now, Jin-Gitaxis' death isn't as permanent. He's presumed dead after being struck down and devoured by his own Phyrexian spawn during a final battle. However, we don't know that for sure, so he could theoretically still be alive. Now, Shieldred was decapitated a little early on, way before Elesh Norn was decapitated, because she failed to invade Dominaria. She wasn't successful, and she was always trying to backstab Elesh Norn, but she was never good enough to beat Elesh Norn. So she always caught her and then punished her, and her final punishment was beheading. Now, Vorinclex was seemingly decapitated by a Scary Knight, possibly Sheila, with a blazing sword during the invasion of Zarfir in Magic the Gathering's March of the Machine storyline. But his fate isn't sealed because he actually has regenerative powers. When he actually went to Kaldheim, all of his flesh was completely atomized except for his metal. And therefore, he just regained it all by eating some other creatures, and bang, bada boom, he can rebuild himself. So it's not sure if he's completely dead or he got severely injured and can regenerate. We're not sure. He's presumed dead until otherwise noticed. Urabrask was captured and quartered by Norn's forces, but left as a torso. His ultimate fate is uncertain, but dismemberment was his intended punishment. As you can see on the screen, he was strapped down and his limbs kind of like. But I imagine Phyrexians can recover from all the dismemberment, you know? So I have hopes in my heart that he's still alive. So what happened to New Phyrexia? Well, the plane of New Phyrexia ended up getting phased out, replacing another phased out plane of Zarfir, which is Teferi's homeland. Way back in the day, he kind of phased them out and then tried really hard to get them back, but he never could. Now, while phased out, Zarfir's time was slowed by a factor of 10. Only a few years passed in its world, while hundreds of years passed in the regular world. So something similar is probably happening to New Phyrexia, that whole time bubble shift. With every Praetor presumed either dead or missing, it is unknown how Phyrexia will appear right now and how it will change in the future. During the final battle in the invasion of New Phyrexia, the angels of New Capenna, that they were stone, but they were turned back into angels, and they helped lead the charge into New Phyrexia because they had all the halo, so they were protected. But when New Phyrexia was trapped in a phased out state, the angels phased out with it. So it has an increase of angels, but it also has no more sons. The five sons of Mirrodin and New Phyrexia are now the five sons of Zalfir. So how will the plane evolve? Maybe the oil isn't inert on New Phyrexia. It just became inert on the multiverse because of Elesh Norn falling, and now the angels kind of rule the plane, or the angels have to fight Phyrexian hordes until they either get overcame or they overcome. Can these angels get infected since they're the source of Halo? Probably not, but who knows? Only time will tell. Now, one great ramification for this war is a few things happened. One, the multiverse changed in a way where now they have portals between planes. So you no longer have to be a planeswalker to travel the multiverse. I think this is a good thing because it creates threats that normally wouldn't be a threat to your world. Valgavoth, for example, is now a threat to all worlds. That's pretty interesting where Before, he was a threat to almost nobody. And now, another thing, a lot of the planeswalkers lose their spark. That's mitigated by these omen paths. However, it was almost random how some planeswalkers lose their spark while others don't. For example, Nissa keeps hers, Chandra, or no, Nissa loses hers, Chandra keeps hers. Omnixilus, Taysir, Karn, Nahiri, Kyora, they all lose their spark. Jace keeps his. I believe Ugin also keeps his. There's a bunch that keep them. Now, why is it randomized? I don't know. The omen paths, I kind of guess, make planeswalking not as big of a deal, but still, there was a whole thing where Nissa was trying to get her spark back with the Aether Spark during that huge Aether Drift race. Now, what are the ramifications? What are the future hold for this? I don't know. I'm more interested in the Phyrexians. Unfortunately, all the planeswalkers that were Phyrexian during this story or got turned, there's 6 total, they're either dead or they're healed completely. So there's no ramifications there, which is unfortunate because a Phyrexian planeswalker just sounds cool. I think Jace would have been a great Phyrexian planeswalker because he already has that attitude of like, I don't really care about anyone else. Add some malice and some Phyrexian oil with that, and that could be a powerful threat in the future. However, it's not going to be because they kind of got rid of it. So for the giveaway for this video, this is the first time I've ever done a giveaway like this. So let's see how it goes. I want you to comment down below your most unique, fun deck that you enjoy playing from your collection. And I will pick one that I find the most interesting, and that will be the winner of the giveaway. Now, these are proxy cards that I make. You can check out some of my shorts if you want to see the quality of the proxies. They're not meant to pass off as real cards. Of course, these ones are Christmas themed. You may not get them before Christmas, but you can always use them every year if you wanted to. Now, comment down below. Like I said, all my paid patrons actually got some versions of these. I made each kind of package a little more unique, so not everyone got the same thing. So if you're interested in the Patreon, go check that out. However, comment down below if you want to go into the giveaway, and then I'll message you whoever wins, and I'll send it to you. Thank you so much for watching till the end of the video. Quick shout out to my patrons. You got Brooke, Who's Neil, and Brody. Appreciate your support. If you're interested, I'll have a link down below. There's a free one, and then there's paid tiers if that's something you're interested in. Now, what did you think about the video? Who is your favorite Phyrexian? Or are you the type that's against the Phyrexians? Would you run headlong into Phyrexia like those Gatewatch planeswalkers did, or would you do something different? Now, this was a video on a specific tribe. Before, I've done a zombie one. This is a Phyrexian one. Is there a tribe you want me to build around and talk about the lore of? I would love to do that. And until next time, guys, I'll be seeing you.